Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And this 2036 season is going really well so far. We are just past the trade deadline, 2 months left in the regular season. And although we are 2 games out in the American League West, we are 9.5 games up on the final wild card spot in the American League. So after missing the playoffs last year for the first time in 5 seasons, I believe that we are pretty well positioned to guide this team back into the postseason. Certainly would love to get past the Texas Rangers and win the division, but they are one of the top teams in baseball, having won 2 of the last 3 World Series championships, and they're also operating in a very different stratosphere than we are as far as their payroll. So while that's the goal, being pragmatic and realistic about things, it's certainly going to be a significant challenge for us. As we head into these final couple months of the season, we made a lot of trades over the month of July, so we have some new players on the team, notably the third baseman Colt Keith, which is a reunion, as well as the outfielder Yanquiel Fernandez. Those are the 2 most notable additions that we've made recently. We also traded for Chase Dora, starting pitcher, a little earlier than we traded for Keith and Fernandez. But we've also made a change to the bullpen. Jeremy Scholl, who is a former All-Star and a former Mariano Rivera Award winner, has been below replacement level overall for us this year as our closer. Does have 20 saves, but a 1-5 record. And we are going to give Kamani Obanor, who we traded for this past offseason, an opportunity to see if he can perhaps do a better job in the closer role. Doug Weiss has been our stopper since he came up, and he's done a really good job in that role, given that it is a higher volume in terms of innings pitched role and probably games pitched than the closer role. We're going to try to keep Weiss in that role for the foreseeable future and hope that perhaps Kaimani Gigolo Obanor does a bit better for us as a closer than Scholl has this year. Financially, just a couple things to touch upon as well. We did get a 3-point addition to fan interest when we brought on Colt Keith and 4 points when we brought on Yanquiel Fernandez. So fan interest has moved from 64 to 71 over the last couple of weeks. You can see we've been selling out recently, so we just upped our ticket prices by a couple of dollars to $29. Hopefully that'll help us generate a bit more revenue over the remainder of this season. Talked a lot in the last episode and got comments from several viewers as well, and I've done some additional thinking about the money that we picked up in trades, and I felt like the amount that we were being offered in trades was just insanely high. But as I thought about it a little bit more, and because I thought at the time the amount we were being offered was insanely high, I generally cut it by 2/3 to what I would actually take, or else this cash from trades number over this season would probably be about 40 million or so. But as I thought about it some more, I kind of feel like I get a little more why the teams just don't care about the cash. Because as you can see here on the accounting statements and the financial statements, the cash for trades goes below the season profit loss. So you can bring in all the cash in trades that you want, and it certainly gives you more financial flexibility in terms of your scouting and development budgets and in terms of signing players to 1-year contracts. But it's not going to actually have a positive or negative impact as far as your team's profitability. So I kind of feel like a lot of these teams at this point in the season, when we were just a week and a half, 2 weeks ahead of the trade deadline, making some of those trades and looking at some of those trades, if the teams have $30-40 million just kind of sitting around and they're not really playing for this year, they're not going to be making a trade for a guy on a 1-year contract, it does make sense to me that they might not value that money as highly. Now, when we get to November and the beginning of the off season, if they trade me that kind of money, then I can kind of use it through the whole free agent period and make a lot more significant 1 year offers to people. But bringing that money on board a week before the trade deadline basically kind of limited my options a bit. I could dump more into player development, but we know that there's significantly diminishing returns after kind of 30, 35, 40 million dollars there. So that would not be an incredibly efficient use of it. Could put more into scouting. What I may end up doing is using, since we've got a lot of money sitting around, and we did pick Mike Goff, who's impossible to sign in the draft and waiting for an offer from us. Says he's looking for over $10 million to bring him on board. So we certainly have the money to make that happen. The negative part with that, though, is that that money will go into draft expenses. So that will, be another, even though it's coming out of the cash from trades that's below the line, the money that we actually pay for our draftees goes into draft expenses, which is going to put us in a position, if we spend $11 million or so on Goff, all of a sudden we're going to go from projected to lose $6.5 million this year to projected to lose about $17.5 million this year, which very well could upset the penny pinching John Fisher. So still have some thoughts to think about there. Clearly, if we're able to guide this team back into the playoffs, would be very helpful in terms of generating a bit more money. But after having that real significant loss a year ago, I am a little concerned that we've had a nice steady increase in our budget over the past few years, and a second straight significant loss, which would be very possible if I spent another 10, 11, 12 million dollars to bring Goff on board, might not be viewed all that positively by Mr. Fisher. So still a lot to think about on that front. Got until early September to actually make an offer to Goff. Right now, because I would like to drive some pretty significant profitability for him this year after losing a lot of money next year, I think I'm inclined to not make an offer to Goff, or to not be all that aggressive with the offer to Goff. But there are still 5.5, 6 weeks for me to reconsider that decision. Taking a look at the schedule for the month, we're going to be at Seattle and San Francisco to get things underway. Big matchup will be 3 games against Texas about 2 weeks from now. Got 3 at Texas at home as we try to chase them down for the division, and then looking into the month of September. We've got 3 more at home with them right at the end of September. And then into October, we've got 4 on the road with Texas to finish things off. So a lot of games with Texas in late October and September. Kind of interestingly, 7 of our final 10 games are against Texas. But until then, the only opportunity we're going to have against the Rangers is the 3 home games coming up in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And we haven't gotten off to a great start in the month of August. 4-5 record. We took the first series on the road against Seattle, split 2 games in San Francisco. But unfortunately, we lost 3 of the first 4 games of this homestand to the Blue Jays. Have those 3 big games against Texas coming up. Unfortunately, in addition to having lost 4 of our last 5 games, we're also in a pretty rough position as far as injuries. Jeremy Scholl, former closer, diagnosis pending for him. Colt Keith, newly added third baseman, diagnosis pending for him. But most significantly, Jake Ortega, who's pursuing a batting title and a chance at leading the American League in WAR for a second time in the past 3 seasons, is going to be out with chronic back soreness for most of the rest of the month. So that likely will cripple his chances to lead the league in WAR again. Probably not going to have a real big impact on the batting title because he still should end up with enough plate appearances, assuming he comes back near the end of the month and can stay healthy through the month of September. But probably his opportunity to lead the league in WAR and his opportunity to drive in 100 runs again this year and his opportunity to win another MVP award probably going to be cost by losing the next 2 to 3 weeks. But if ultimately we guide this team to the playoffs and he's healthy for the playoffs, it'll just be a little blip on the radar. We have dipped to 4.5 behind the Rangers in the division, so this series is going to be very important. Still do have an 8.5 game lead on the final wild card spot. So we've lost a game there over these past week and a half or so, but still in a very good position. We're also 6 games up on the Yankees for the first wild card spot. So clearly the hope would be to pass the Texas Rangers and get a first round bye and get a division title. But at least if we do end up stuck in a wild card series, at this point we would at least be hosting that wild card season if the season were to end today. As we sit here 113 games into the season, Juan Ramos continues to have exactly 1 ribby for every game that we've played, and Ortega with a 1-win above replacement lead above Dan Harrison, but that number is likely going to be shrinking in the next few weeks with Ortega not on the field. And although Chase Dora has not been great for us yet, on paper he's still one of the most talented pitchers on our pitching staff. So we're still pleased with the fact that we've brought him on board for the next 4+ years at a pretty reasonable price point. But as you will remember, to bring him on board, we had to trade away Brady Harris, who was set to hit free agency after this season, and he was really our backup center fielder. We also, this past offseason, moved on from Luis Lara, our longtime center fielder. So we don't, unfortunately, have a ton of depth at center field at the major league level behind Jake Ortega. So what we're going to do is bring up Sergio Palomares. You may remember him, international free agent signing in 2039. Thought he could potentially be an exceptional contact hitter, and he certainly hasn't developed into that. We do think his contact, gap power, and his eye are all a bit above average. Excellent speed, pretty good range out in center field, although he's probably at best an average major league center fielder. Doesn't have a lot of home run power, and he's only hitting .258 up in AAA for us, but he is now 24 years old. He was a prized IAFA signing of ours from, as we mentioned, 7 years ago, and we gave him $3.75 million. Don't think he's ever going to be a big-time major leaguer at this point, but certainly with that speed and that glove, he could probably be a guy for us who plays regularly against left-handed pitching going forward and gives us a little more defensive quality with a potential pinch hitter, late-inning defensive substitution, pinch runner even coming off the bench. So Palomares will be getting a lot of playing time over the next few weeks. We're going to be batting him ninth against both righties and lefties, try to take the pressure off of him. And we'll wait to find out what happens with the potential injuries to Colt Keith and Jeremy Scholl, how serious those end up being. And we got some good news and some bad news on the injuries. Scholl just has a stiff back, not going to be a big issue. Unfortunately, Colt Keith with a strained ab is going to be out for about 6 weeks. We also have lost the first 2 games of this series at home to the Rangers. So we've dipped to 6.5 behind. Still have over a month and a half left in the season, and we still have, as we noted, 7 of our final 10 games with Texas. But clearly going to need to be playing better than we have thus far this month of August to ensure that we have a reasonable chance of getting by them in the final weeks of the season. And as we're getting ready to put Keith on the IL for most of the rest of the regular season, in the 12 games he has played with us, he's got 4 doubles, 1 home run, 4 ribbies, has walked 8 times. The batting average just 256, but the OPS over 800, and he's put up a 126 WRC plus for us. So only a little bit better than replacement level, given that his defense at this point is not particularly good, but it does seem like he's finding a little bit of a fountain of youth with the bat. Certainly would hope for a little more from him, particularly if we do end up guiding this team into the playoffs. But he has jump-started our offense a little bit. But with Keith headed to the IL for about a month and a half, Rodney Mesidor going to be back in the lineup every day, and likely will be making a call down to AAA for Mr. Castellanos to rejoin the roster. And we ended up getting swept at home by the Rangers, so certainly not an impressive 1-6 homestand for Oakland. We have won 3 out of 4 on this new road trip against Tampa Bay, but midway through the month of August, we've slipped to 6.5 behind the Rangers in the division. Still have an 8-game lead on the final wild card spot, so fortunately for us, the other teams fighting for the wild card not playing incredibly well at this point. Ortega has been passed by Galterio Mancina in the batting race. Ramos continues to lead the league in ribbies. Ortega third in OPS, still leading in batter WAR, and somehow he picked up a 1/10 of a win in batter WAR even though he wasn't playing, so that's interesting. Jackson Ferris tied for second, still in the league in wins, although he has at this point finally dropped out of the top 3 in the league in strikeouts. And our A's have played a little better over the past week. We split a 2-game series against San Francisco when we got home, but then we just swept a 4-game homestand against Houston, including 14-0 and 10-3 wins with some low-scoring football games in the last 2 games of that series. So we've closed the gap on the Rangers to 3.5, and Alejandro Landin was the American League Player of the Week, hit .526, 5 homers, 11 ribbies. You may remember the second baseman who was a IAFA signing of ours back in 2027 was named to his first All-Star game about a month ago. But as good as we were feeling about things, we now lost 3 in a row on the road to the Angels, staying in Los Angeles to play the Dodgers for the next 3 games. So hopefully we can win some games on the road at the Dodgers, because all of a sudden we're right back to being 6.5 games behind the Rangers. Our lead in the wild card, 7.5 up on the final wild card spot. Jake Ortega has moved back into first in the batting race, even though he hasn't been playing, and he's still actually leading the league in batter WAR. And most importantly, Ortega is now healthy and ready to come off of the IL. We'll check in and see exactly how our replacement for him ended up doing. The young Mr. Palomares hit .250 in 52 at-bats for us, 2 doubles, 3 triples, stole a base, was basically a league average-ish offensive player, a little above a replacement level. So I think we'll likely be seeing Palomares again in just a few days. We're going to send him down right now back to AAA, but given his range in the outfield, think that he'll be a good insurance policy for Mr. Ortega, and can perhaps be a defensive substitute in left field and right field, where the turnover of our outfield that really occurred over the past month or so with the trades of Mr. Harris and Mr. Cabral makes us a little bit more in need of a pretty solid defensive outfielder, which I think Palomares is. And we did end up taking 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers, so we made it to September 1st and September roster expansion. Still 6.5 back on the Rangers. We're 9.5 games up on the final wild card spot, which the Guardians and the Royals are tied for at this point. Ortega back, leading the league in hitting, still leading the league in batter war. Ramos has slowed down a bit, is now second in the National League in ribbies. Taking a look on a little more depth as far as our team statistics. We were a 500 team in August. That was pretty disappointing after the great month that we had in July. We've definitely gotten a bit unlucky. Our 77 wins is 4 games below Pythagorean expectations. First in the AL in runs scored, and you can see we are in the top 3 in just about every offensive category. Pretty mediocre base running right now. Really good defense, and we're 4th in the league in runs allowed. So statistically, the team kind of looks the way it has for the last couple months of the season, with one of the top offenses in the American League, along with a really good pitching staff, good defense. So have to feel we got a little bit unlucky over the last month, and we'll hope that by adding a few more guys onto the roster, we're able to fill in a few holes, get a look at some prospects, and then eventually the hope is certainly that Colt Keith will be back before the end of the season. Checking in with over a month of action for a couple of the new additions outside of the injured Colt Keith. Yanquiel Fernandez hitting just .227 for us, 4 homers, 16 ribbies, and 88 at-bats. The 82 WRC plus, certainly not what we were anticipating when we brought him on board. It's very conceivable that that's still better than what we would have gotten out of Bobby Cabral. But given Fernandez's resume with a couple of all-star appearances, a couple of Silver Sluggers, and a couple of playoff series MVP awards, and the fact he had put up a 143 WRC plus over the first 3+ months of the season in Seattle, hoping that we'll get a bit more out of him over this last month of the season. Chase Dora has finally started pitching a little better for us. The record is 3-2 since he joined us, but the ERA has gotten down to 3.54. So the top of the order, the top of the rotation with Ferris, Dora, and DeCaro is pretty solid. Kevin Patterson, 10-6, 4.37 ERA. And then Bobby Garland, second on the team with 11 wins, even though he wasn't even in the rotation at the start of the season. You may remember the flamethrower that we picked up from the Boston Red Sox organization as a Rule 5 pick, Mr. Deeds, I believe, was not that good in the 3 or 4 starts we gave him before we moved on. Doug Weiss still doing a really nice job for us as a setup man. Kamani O'Banner doing pretty fine as the closer for us. Take a look at what he did in the month of August, which was all in that closer role. 2.31 ERA over 11 2/3 innings. Only 5 saves, and he did lose a couple of games for us. But statistically this year, he has certainly been better than Mr. Scholl. So we'll continue to keep O'Banner in the closer role for the time being. And the only pitcher we brought back up was Amari Raphael. He's been up and down a couple times this year, but at this point, Chris Carl, the lefty out of our bullpen, is back on the IL with a minor issue. He should be back in a few days. So Raphael may be a short-term addition at this point, although it's conceivable we might demote a position player rather than Raphael, depending on how the rotation and the bullpen look in a couple of days, if anyone's banged up at all. Lineup-wise, as we expected, we brought back Sergio Palomares to give us a little more defensive depth. We also brought up Juan Lovato. He's the somehow listed as the number 5 prospect in baseball. Still don't really understand that. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's really improved. Kind of think he's going to be an average offensive player, given that the likelihood of big improvements is not great at 24 and a half years old. He was good for us in AAA, 11 homers and 29 ribbies with a 301 average. Did not do much at all with Atlanta, hitting just a .44 in 118 at-bats with them earlier this year before we picked him up in the trade where we moved on from Mr. Campos. So he'll get a little playing time. And then Luis Coronado, our second-round pick from the 2031 draft, was not particularly impressive this year in his first experience in AAA. Hit just 248. Did have 19 doubles, 14 homers, but overall just a 71 WRC plus. But he is a versatile defensive player who can help us out anywhere in the infield if we're going to be pinch hitting a little more aggressively, trying to win close games over the next month or so. So Coronado, Palomares, Lovato, and Rafael are your 4 initial September call-ups for the Oakland A's here in 2036. And we did win the first game of the month, 12-7 over the Padres. Unfortunately, Jake Ortega banged up again, groin soreness, going to impact him for the next week. With the extra players that we've got on board, think we're going to be real conservative with him. Would love to obviously catch Texas in the division. Realistically, 6.5 games back, probably not going to happen. But using the same logic, we are 6.5 games up on the Yankees for the first wild card spot, and being able to potentially host a wild card series against the Yankees. So if I'm going to say we don't really need Ortega out there because we're probably not going to catch the Rangers, well, then it's fair to say that we don't really need him out there because I don't think the Yankees are going to catch us either. And as we head towards the middle of the month, we're playing just around 500 baseball again here in September. We split our first 2 games with the Padres, took 2 out of 3 at home against Detroit, and then took 2 out of 3 at home against Houston. Unfortunately, we did just lose 2 out of 3 on the road trip to the Angels. At Houston and at Colorado this week before we host the Red Sox. And then, as we talked about, we'll be finishing up with 7 of our final 10 games against the Rangers. We've closed the gap to 5 games with the Rangers. 7.5 up on the final wild card, but we're 7 up on the Yankees for the first wild card spot. So still feeling like, in all probability, we are going to end up the first wild card in the American League, the 4th seed overall, and likely facing the Yankees or the Angels, who will in all probability be traveling to Oakland for a wild card series. You can see Ortega now in a 3-way tie for the AL batting title. Ramos once again leading the league in ribbies, and Ortega is still leading the league in batter war. Jackson Ferris is 3rd in the American League in wins, but Steve Jeannis looks like he is well on his way to winning a 3rd straight Cy Young Award, leading the league with 22 wins, 267 strikeouts, and a 7.3 pitcher WAR, and he's 2nd in the American League in ERA this season. Speaking of big-time players, Mike Ramsey from Atlanta, 20-3 record with a 1.76 ERA and 287 strikeouts. A ridiculous 10.5 WAR as a pitcher for the defending Cy Young Award / MVP winner. And as a hitter, the Braves' brilliant player, 278 average, 32 homers, and 83 ribbies with a 5.1 WAR as a hitter. So Ramsey continues to look like a player who is going to ultimately be in a Babe Ruth, Shohei Ohtani type of pantheon as far as 2-way players when all is said and done. And thinking about guys that we have high expectations for, and for those of you who are wondering, we decided not to make an offer to the fourth round pick, Mike Goff. But our first round pick this year, Mike Blumenshine, going to be out for another 7 months with shoulder inflammation. He only pitched 3 games in rookie ball. We were hoping we could quickly move him up to A and high A, but obviously he injured himself a month and a half ago and is going to, unfortunately, not even be healthy enough to be in the development lab this offseason. And he certainly wasn't even impressive in rookie ball. 0-1 record with a 7.45 ERA over 9 2/3 innings pitched. Did strike out 16 batters, but certainly not the start to Mr. Blumenshine's career that we had hoped we would see. And as we near the final couple weeks of the season, still 5 games behind Texas. As we noted, we got 7 games with them in the final 10, so can't rule out the division yet. We have gotten to add Brooks Lee back on the team. You may remember we picked him up in a trade with the Angels, stashed him on the IL. He is finally healthy, gives us another proven major leaguer who can play multiple positions reasonably competently in the infield. And I guess we could play him in right field if we really needed to. We sent the young outfielder, Mr. Ramos, back down. He was not playing much at all. Colt Keith, unfortunately, still out for another week. We just got a report that he's not recovering as well as we expected. So probably we'll have him back for the final few games of the season to hopefully at least shake off the rust before the playoffs. And quite honestly, he's going to have to make a case to be in the starting lineup in the playoffs most likely, and hopefully he'll get a chance to do that over the last several days of the season. And we did end up winning the final game of the week to avoid being swept in Colorado. So 2 weeks left in the regular season at this point. We've got 3 against Boston and then 3 big ones at home against Texas, because with that win, we did close the gap to 4 on them. And then we'll be finishing up into the month of September, 3 at Houston and then 4 on the road at Texas. Still certainly a big underdog to get by the Rangers. Their magic number is down to 10. Our magic number to clinch a return to the playoffs is down to 3. Ortega and Ramos still battling to lead the league in batting average and RBIs, respectively. Ortega also now in a pretty good race for batter WAR. Jackson Ferris looks like still a good chance that he's going to end up in the top 3 in the American League in wins. And we did take 2 out of 3 at home against Boston, so getting ready for 3 games against Texas among the final 10 of the season, as we've talked about. Still 4 games behind. We're closing in on 90 wins. Think it's unlikely that we're going to make up 4 games on Texas in the final 10, but with 7 games against them, we've got certainly an opportunity to potentially do that if everything goes well. Unfortunately, an issue with the pitching staff. Jackson Ferris, our ace, may not end up being in the top 3 in the American League in wins because mild shoulder strain going to keep him out for a week. With the fact that we've got plenty of pitchers on the roster, we are going to be extremely conservative with Mr. Ferris to ensure that hopefully he's ready and healthy for the playoffs, and we're going to shut him down at least for the next week. And then if he does come back and pitch one final game for us, likely just try to set him up so he'll be ready to go in game 1 of the wild card series that will, at this point, likely be against our division rival, Los Angeles Angels, who have won 9 in a row. They are now 5 clear of the Yankees for that second wild card spot, and we've got 5 games on them for the first wild card spot. And we ended up sweeping the final homestand of the season against the Rangers, winning a 1-run game each day, 3-2, 5-4, and 9-8. So You can't say that our A's are not making this interesting as we head into the final 7 games of the season, 3 on the road in Houston and then 4 on the road in Texas. We've closed the gap with the game to the Rangers to just 1 game, which is close as we've been to them in several months at this point. We've obviously clinched a wild card spot at this point, 10.5 games up on the third wild card spot with just 7 games to go. Ramos back on top in ribbies, but looking like Ortega may come up just short once again in his effort to win his first batting title. And unfortunately, perhaps 1 game is going to be as close as we get to the Rangers. We just lost the opener on the road to Houston. Texas won, so they're now 2 games up on us with 6 to go. I guess the good news is that even if we lose 2 in a row and they win 2 in a row, we're still not going to mathematically be eliminated, but we'll put ourselves in a position where we have to be perfect in that final 4-game series, which is unlikely, but we did just win 3 straight against them at home. Good news, Colt Keith is back, so we're going to put him right into the lineup at third base for these next couple weeks. Probably needs to shake off a little bit of rust, but at this point, not really a minor league season for him to be participating in, so we'll see if he can shake off some rust at the major league level and make a case to be our third baseman come playoff time. And we did just beat the Astros 7-3 on the final day of September. Texas lost, so they're a game ahead of us. If we somehow win the final game of the road trip to Houston tomorrow and Texas loses, we could shockingly be in a flat-footed tie with them heading into the final series of the season. And it's potentially a big thing because the difference between being first in the AL West and second in the AL West could be the difference between having a number 1 seed throughout the AL playoffs, home field advantage throughout the AL playoffs, and a first-round bye, whereas whoever finishes second between us and Texas is going to likely be facing, or certainly at this point going to be facing, a familiar division rival in a wild card series. So there's definitely a lot at stake over these last 5 games of the year. And I believe the last time we checked in on the young outfielder Arturo Uresti, who we brought up when we had traded away Brady Harris, he was struggling with a batting average in the 230s. He just capped off a monster month, though. The American League Rookie of the Month for September hit .301 with 10 home runs and 25 ribbies. So he's been a big part of our offense. Now on the year, .259 average, 19 homers and 55 ribbies and 259 at-bats. He's got 38 combined homers now between AA, AAA, and the majors this year, and a 138 WRC plus for us. So probably not quite as productive as Brady Harris might have been, and certainly not as good defensively as Brady Harris, but given that deal hopefully really helped our pitching staff for several years to come with the acquisition of Chase Dora, I think it made sense. We'll find out right now whether or not we're going to head into Texas tied with them, and unfortunately, no, we lost. They also lost, so Texas a game up on us as we get ready for the final series of the season. And 159 games into the season, the American League West is all knotted up. 12-8 victory in the first game of this road trip to Houston. We had a monster 8-run second inning, added 3 more in the 5th, and kind of held on for dear life after that, but did end up getting a 12-8 victory. A couple of ribbies each from Toribio, Ramos, Uresti, Ackley, and Palomares. So good to see the offense coming through. Not the best performance out of Jason DeCaro, but we got the W. And with 3 games left in this season, we are in a flat-footed tie with the reeling Rangers, who have lost 3 in a row. So Whoever takes 2 out of the next 3 is going to be the AL West division winner, with Toronto at 94 wins, the White Sox at 93, and both our A's and Rangers at 94. As we talked about, the stakes are incredibly high because the difference between winning this series and losing this series, as we talked about, could be a number 1 seed in the AL with a bye versus a wild card series hosting the Los Angeles Angels. So it all comes down to these final 3 games of the season, and we've got a tough matchup with the likely Cy Young Award winner Steve Genius on the mound for Texas. Would love to be thinking about setting up this rotation for the playoffs, but I guess the goal for us is to throw the best guys out there until we're officially out of it or we've officially clinched, and then start worrying about the playoff rotations at that point. And we did just record another win against Texas, and we did it the hard way. Oh my goodness. We were down 4-1 heading into the top of the 9th. Arturo Uresti, who's been on fire, as we've talked about, 3-run hit, 3-run homer was the big blow. Genius was excellent. We just needed to get into that bullpen, though, and we are now 1 win away from toppling the Rangers in the American League West. And here in the 161st game of the year, when we might have an opportunity to clinch, number 5 starter, the lefty Bobby Garland, who's done a really nice job for us since taking over in that number 5 spot this year, going up against Ben Brawner of the Texas Rangers. See what happens here in game 161. Can we clinch a division against the mighty Texas Rangers? And of course, to add to the suspense, it's taking a long time to figure out whether it's all going to come down to game number 162. And it is going to come down to game number 162 as they beat us 11-5. So they finally stopped that long losing streak. We're both 95 and 66. Garland with a rough outing. Curtis, Carl, DeVore, basically all of the relievers except for Chisin Harimoto got batted around pretty well. So we're in a very interesting position now. In a flat-footed tie with the Rangers. Both of us have one more win than the White Sox, so the Blue Jays, conceivably having won 2 in a row, could clinch the number 1 seed, but the winner of this game is going to be the number 2 seed in the American League and have a first-round bye. The loser of this game is going to be hosting the Wild Card Series, so you can't ask for much more than that. Looks like Jake Ortega has been struggling. He's dropped to 2nd in the American League in batter war, and his .315 batting average has dropped out of the top 3 for basically the first time this year. Would love to have a monster game from him on this final day of the season. We've got our ace on the mound in Jackson Ferris. He's back from that injury, and although we'd hate to lose him for a potential wild card series, kind of feel like pitching for the opportunity to have a first round bye. We've got the guy that we'd like on the mound for that game. Let's see how it goes. The suspense builds, and we lost to Texas. So once again, we just needed one of those final 2 games against the Texas Rangers to finally topple them in the American League West. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Our ace on the mound, and he wasn't horrible, but he wasn't great. 5 hits, a walk, 7 strikeouts, 3 earned runs over 5 innings pitched. Finishes the year with a 17-5 record. Chris Carl gave up a couple runs in relief, which didn't help. They got a nice performance from the veteran Rosny Contreras. And unfortunately, we are going to find ourselves in the dreaded wild card series. We will have home field advantage against the Angels, but we have also just pitched our number one starter. So unfortunately, we'll be going with numbers 2, 3, and possibly 4 in our rotation in this upcoming wild card series against the Los Angeles Angels. But a nice bounce back year when all is said and done for the A's. 95-67 guided the team back into the playoffs. Unfortunately, the Rangers once again edge us in the division. We were on the brink of it with a magic number of 2 and 2 games to go against the team that was chasing us. But unfortunately, they won both of those games. And despite a 95-win season, we're going to be playing in a wild card series this year. And Juan Ramos did end up leading the league in ribbies his first year in Oakland after missing all of last year. Jake Ortega ends up second in batter WAR. Jackson Ferris tied for second in wins and third in strikeouts when all was said and done. But it's time for us to regroup, make some decisions about what this playoff roster is going to look like and what the playoff rotation is going to look like. And then hopefully get ready to win in our return to the playoffs against the Los Angeles Angels. Take a quick look at the team statistics when all was said and done. Had a nice bounce back in September with a 16-9 record. Did go 2-3 in October, unfortunately. Those last 2 the most painful. Ended up first in the American League in runs scored and near the top of the league in every offensive category. Pretty middling base running statistics when all was said and done. Very good pitching staff, top 3 or 4 in most pitching categories. Ended up third in runs allowed, third in starters ERA, and third in bullpen ERA, so some big progress there. Pretty solid defense for the year. And the 95-67 record was 3 worse than expectations. Obviously, if we had fulfilled expectations, we would have a first-round bye rather than a wild card series coming up. But when all was said and done, we are at least back in the playoffs. We had 2 big goals this year to achieve a winning record, and we ended up with a 95-win season back in the playoffs. And to improve our starters ERA, and we went from 12th all the way to 3rd. So thinking that we should get a pretty nice grade from Mr. Fisher when we get to that type of evaluation at the end of the season. But the hope is we'll have a lot of playoff success between now and then. And we'll find out how the postseason goes in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.